My name is Lily. I'm 28 years old, and last month I lost my father. But what I didn't know then was that his death would also mean losing everything else I had ever believed in. Death doesn't arrive like it does in the movies. It doesn't knock on your door in the form of a police officer with a grim face. Calls you on the phone. In my case, it was Ethan, my brother. His voice surprisingly steady, almost businesslike. Dad's gone, Lily. Heart attack. It was quick. I remember sinking to the floor of my small rented apartment in Brooklyn, the phone slipping from my hand. The world narrowed to the dial tone and the pattern on the old hardwood floor. Quick. Quick for whom? For him, maybe. But for me, time had stopped, then shattered into a million sharp pieces. Our father, Richard Carter, was a titan. Not in business, no. He was a history professor at Columbia University, a man whose world was made of books, dusty artifacts, and stories of fallen empires. To me, he was the entire universe. After Mom died when I was just 10, he became my only anchor. Ethan was 8 years older, and even then he was different. He was carved from a different, harder, colder material. His was a world of numbers, ambition, and sharp corners. Dad's was a world of words, warmth, and gentle curves. I was always a daddy's girl. The funeral was a blur. People in black, sympathetic glances, handshakes that felt clammy. Ethan was the perfect grieving son. He stood by the casket, tall, in an impeccably tailored suit. His face a mask of noble sorrow. His wife, Isabella, held his arm, her tear-filled eyes constantly turning to the guests as if seeking confirmation of their shared tragedy. I just stood aside, mute and hollow, feeling like a ghost at my own family's mourning. The real horror began a week later, in the lawyer's office. Mr. Henderson's office smelled of old leather and lemon polish. It was the same office where, many years ago, Dad had signed the papers for the house we grew up in. The house in a Connecticut suburb, with a huge oak tree in the backyard and a porch where we'd spent countless summer evenings. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, his thin-rimmed glasses sliding down his nose. Well, let's get to Richard's will. He laid a document on the table. Ethan sat across from me, his face unreadable. I, Richard Allen Carter, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath all of my property, real and personal, including the house at 142, Oak Lane, all bank accounts, investments, and personal effects to my son, Ethan Richard Carter. Blinked. Then again. The words didn't form a coherent sentence. I looked at Henderson, then at Ethan. What? My voice was barely a whisper. But what about me? Henderson adjusted his glasses awkwardly. Lillian, your name is not mentioned in the will. Not mentioned. I felt an icy coldness clench inside me. That can't be right. Some kind of mistake. Dad would never. The will was updated 2 months ago, Ethan interrupted. His voice was as calm as a frozen lake. Dad decided everything himself. He wanted me to take care of things. Take care of things. I shot to my feet. The chair scraped loudly behind me. He left me with nothing. Without the house I grew up in. It's our house. It's my house now, Ethan snapped. There wasn't a shred of sympathy in his eyes. Only a cold, calculating glint. Dad was worried about you, Lily. About your instability. He thought it was best for you to start building your own life without a crutch. Instability. He was referring to the year after college when I'd battled depression. The year Dad was by my side every step of the way, while Ethan called once a month to ask if I'd found a real job yet. Tears blurred my vision. You're lying. This is a fake. Dad loved me. Love doesn't pay the bills, Ethan said, standing up as well, towering over me. I've been managing his finances for the last few years. He trusted me. He knew I would make the right decisions. Now, if you're done with your tantrum, I have things to do. He turned and walked out, leaving me in an office that suddenly felt like a tomb. Mr. Henderson was saying something about legality, about signatures, about witnesses, but I couldn't hear him. I could only hear the sound of my world crumbling. That evening I drove to our house. My key still fit the lock. Inside, it was quiet and smelled of Dad's pipe tobacco and old books. I wandered through the rooms, touching things, each object a thread to a memory. Here was the armchair where he read me fairy tales. Here was the piano where I learned my first scales. Here was his desk, papers scattered across it. On the desk, I saw an envelope with my name written in Dad's familiar handwriting. My heart pounded. Maybe this letter would explain everything. I tore it open with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet. "My dearest Lily," it read, "forgive me. I love you more than life itself. Remember that no matter what happens, your Dad." And that was it. No explanation. Nothing. The door slammed shut. Ethan appeared in the hall. His face twisted in fury when he saw me. "What are you doing here? I told you this isn't your home anymore." "I came to get my things," I whispered, clutching the letter in my hand. "And to say goodbye." "You have 1 hour," he snapped. "Then I'm changing the locks." He watched as I packed my few belongings into boxes. Not the paintings, not the furniture, that all belonged to him now. Just my books, old photos, clothes. As I walked past him with the last box, he stopped me. "You know what your problem is, Lily? You've always been too sentimental. You live in a dream world, not the real one. Dad knew that. That's why he left everything to me. To someone who knows what to do with it." He smiled. It wasn't the smile a brother gives his sister. It was the smile of a predator that had just devoured its prey. And in that moment, looking into his cold, triumphant eyes, I understood. He hadn't just taken my inheritance. He had stolen my past, my sense of security, my faith in family. He had erased me from our history. I stood on the street in the drizzling rain, looking at the lit windows of the house that was no longer mine. The boxes containing my life were getting soaked on the sidewalk. The despair was so thick I could barely breathe. But through it, like a tiny sprout, something else was pushing through. Something dark and hard. Rage. He thought I was weak, sentimental. He thought I would break and disappear. He was wrong. He had taken everything from me. But he had given me something in return. Purpose. "I will destroy you, Ethan. I will take your perfect life apart, brick by brick, until there's nothing left but ashes. Just like you did to mine." The first few weeks were hell. I moved onto the couch in my friend Sarah's tiny apartment. By day, I worked my freelance graphic design job, taking small gigs that barely paid for food. By night, I couldn't sleep. I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene in the lawyer's office. Ethan's cold voice, his predatory smile. My grief for my father was mixed with a searing hatred for my brother. I knew I couldn't contest the will in court. Ethan was smart. He would have covered his tracks. He had money, the best lawyers. Had nothing. A direct attack would be suicide. So I had to do it differently. Not a frontal assault, but a knife in the back. Hit him where it hurt. Ethan had built his life on 3 pillars. His impeccable reputation in the financial world, his perfect marriage to Isabella, and his image as a devoted family man. I decided to destroy all 3. I started with the marriage. Isabella was the daughter of one of the partners at Ethan's firm. Their marriage was as strategic as any of his investments. She was beautiful, from a good family, the perfect accessory to his image of success. But I had always sensed a certain phoniness behind their smiles at family dinners. I started following Ethan. It was humiliating and terrifying. I'd sit for hours in my old Honda near his Wall Street office, my face hidden by a hoodie. I watched him leave, get into his gleaming Mercedes, and drive away. A few times he went straight home to Connecticut, and I felt a pang of disappointment. But I was patient. Desperation is an excellent teacher of patience. In the second week of my surveillance, he deviated from his usual route. He drove downtown to Soho and parked outside an expensive restaurant. A few minutes later, a woman approached him. A tall blonde in a tight red dress. They kissed. Not a friendly kiss. Long, greedy one. My hands shook, but I managed to snap a few pictures on my phone through the windshield. The quality was terrible, but they were recognizable. I followed them a few more times. They met at the same hotel, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I gathered enough evidence. Photos, dates, times. Now I had to decide how to deliver it. Sending an anonymous note to Isabella would be too easy. Ethan could deny everything, paint me as a crazy, jealous sister. No, the blow had to be public and devastating. Isabella was involved in charity work. Her main project was an annual gala for a children's foundation. It was the premier social event for their circle. The perfect stage for drama. Getting a ticket was nearly impossible, but I found a loophole. I offered my design services to create the event program. For free. The organizers happily accepted. This gave me backstage access. On the night of the gala, I was like a shadow. In a simple black dress, a notepad in my hand, I blended in with the staff. The ballroom glittered with crystal and diamonds. Ethan and Isabella were the center of attention. He in a tuxedo, she in a silver gown. They laughed, posed for photographers, the very picture of the American dream. Their hypocrisy made me sick. The main event of the evening was a film presentation about the foundation's work. Isabella was supposed to introduce it. 10 minutes before it started, I found the technician in charge of the projector. A young guy, tired and overworked. I told him that Mrs. Carter had requested a last-minute change to the video and handed him a flash drive. "Here's the corrected version, just a couple of shots at the end," I said in the most confident tone I could muster. Without looking, he nodded and inserted the drive into the laptop. I retreated to a dark corner of the ballroom. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Isabella took the stage. She spoke about the importance of family, of fidelity, of helping those in need. On the large screen behind her, touching images of children played. And then, just as she said, all of this would have been impossible without the support of my loving husband, Ethan. The video ended. The screen went black for a second. And then my photos appeared. First one. Ethan kissing the blonde outside the restaurant. A hush fell over the room. Then a second, them entering the hotel. Third, a fourth. Close-ups. Undeniable proof. Isabella stopped mid-sentence. She turned and saw it. Her face, which a moment ago had been glowing with pride, became a mask of horror and humiliation. A murmur went through the crowd. Hundreds of eyes were fixed on her, on the screen, on Ethan, who had jumped from his seat. His face as white as a sheet. The technician frantically shut off the projector, but it was too late. The damage was done. Isabella, without a word, turned and fled the stage. Ethan rushed after her. I slipped out of the ballroom unnoticed. Outside, the cold night air burned my lungs. I didn't feel triumphant. Just a cold, empty satisfaction. The first pillar was dead. The next target was his career. Ethan and Isabella's divorce was loud and messy. Her father, being a senior partner, couldn't fire Ethan, but he made his life at the firm unbearable. Ethan's reputation in their tight-knit circle was ruined. But Wall Street is a cynical place. As long as you're making money, nobody cares about your personal life. To destroy his career, I needed something more than adultery. I needed fraud. I remembered my father's words. About a year before he died, he had casually mentioned to me, "Ethan is taking too many risks. He's chasing quick profits, using some borderline schemes. I'm afraid it will end badly for him one day." I hadn't paid much attention then. Now those words were my guide. I needed access to his work computer. Seemed like an impossible task. But then I remembered Jenny. Jenny had been Ethan's assistant a few years ago. He had fired her for some minor mistake, and she hated him for it. I found her on social media. She was working at a small coffee shop in Queens. I went to see her. She recognized me. I didn't beat around the bush. I told her everything. About the will, about how Ethan had thrown me out of our home. I wasn't asking for sympathy. I was offering a deal. I need to get into his office. At night. You know, the security system, the codes, the camera locations. She looked at me for a long time, her eyes narrowed. "He's a piece of shit," she finally said. "He ruined my career. I couldn't find a job for months because of his references." "What's in it for me?" "Satisfaction," I said. "And $10,000 as soon as I sell my car." She agreed. We spent 2 weeks preparing. Jenny drew me a map of the office. She told me the cameras in the main corridor shut down for 5 minutes to reboot at exactly 2:15 a.m. She remembered the code to his office. The password for his computer, she said. He hadn't changed in years. Isabella 88. The year of their wedding. The irony was brutal. The night of the operation was the most terrifying of my life. Parked a few blocks away. Dressed in black, a backpack on my shoulders, I felt like a character in a cheap action movie. At 2:13, I entered the building through a service entrance using a code Jenny had given me. I went up to the 45th floor. My heart was in my throat. At 2:15, I dashed down the corridor to his office. Code worked. I was inside. The office was huge, with a panoramic window overlooking the Manhattan skyline, the city he thought he owned. I sat at his desk. My hands were shaking so badly I could hardly type the password. Isabella 88. Access granted. I only had a few minutes. I inserted a flash drive and started copying everything that looked suspicious. Folders named special projects, offshore, personal. I didn't understand finance, but I knew what I was looking for. I was looking for dirt. And I found it. It wasn't just risky stock market plays. It was a full-blown Ponzi scheme. He was using money from new investors to pay returns to older ones. Many of his clients were elderly people, old friends of our father who had entrusted him with their retirement savings. He was robbing them blind while smiling to their faces. I found spreadsheets, correspondence with offshore banks, fake reports. This was it. The motherlode. When the files finished copying, I pulled out the flash drive, erased my digital footprints, and slipped out of the office. A minute later, the cameras turned back on. Outside, I gasped for air. I had done it. The next day, I sent anonymous packages with printouts and a copy of the flash drive. One to the Securities and Exchange Commission. The other to the New York Times. A week later, the bomb exploded. Front page story. Financier Ethan Carter accused of multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. His photo was next to the headline. Not the confident master of the universe shot, but one I'd taken outside the hotel, blurry with a predatory look on his face. An investigation was launched. His accounts were frozen. His partners turned their backs on him. Clients sued him. His name became synonymous with fraud. I sat in a coffee shop, reading the article on my tablet, drinking cheap coffee. I was watching his empire crumble. I imagined his panic, his fury. And this time I felt something like triumph. A cold, vengeful triumph, but triumph nonetheless. The second pillar had drowned in the ocean of lies he himself had created. Only one remained. His image. The very foundation on which everything else was built. And to destroy it, I had to dig deeper. Into our shared past. After ruining Ethan's marriage and career, I thought I would feel a sense of relief. But an emptiness remained. This wasn't just about revenge for the inheritance. It was about something more, something I didn't fully understand yet. The answers I felt lay in the past. My thoughts went back to that farewell letter from my father. Forgive me. What was he asking forgiveness for? For giving everything to Ethan? Or for something else? I started going through the old things I kept in boxes at Sarah's place. Photo albums, school diaries, letters. And I came across a photograph. It showed me Ethan and another boy, Mark. Mark had been Ethan's best friend in high school. They were inseparable. And then, in their senior year, Mark just disappeared. His parents said their family had moved to California. Ethan never spoke of him again. Looking at that photo, I felt a strange pang of unease. I started to remember. That year had been strange. Ethan had become withdrawn, angry. He was having problems with Dad. They were constantly arguing behind closed doors. I was too young to understand what was going on. I started searching for Mark online. It wasn't easy. His last name was common. But after a few days I found him. Not him exactly. His obituary. Mark had died 2 years after his family had supposedly moved. Cause of death: overdose. He had been in a rehab clinic in Oregon. Something didn't add up. I found his sister Emily. She was a couple of years younger. I wrote to her. I told her I was Ethan Carter's sister, Mark's old friend. She didn't reply right away. Her response was short and cold. I don't want to talk about Ethan Carter. That was exactly what I needed. I persisted. I told her I was trying to understand my family's past, that it was very important. Eventually she agreed to meet. We met in a quiet park. Emily was a woman with tired eyes that held a permanent pain. We didn't move, she said immediately, without preamble. Mark was in an accident. The night he disappeared. Icy fingers gripped my heart. He was at a party with your brother. They had been drinking. Ethan was driving his new sports car, a gift from your father. They crashed into a tree. She took a deep breath. Mark suffered terrible spinal injuries. He would never walk again. The doctors said he would be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. He fell into a depression, started on painkillers, then moved on to heavier things. That's what killed him. I sat there, unable to speak. And Ethan, I whispered. Ethan walked away with a few scratches. And your father covered it all up. Hatred tinged her voice. He had connections, money. He paid us to keep quiet and leave town. He said Ethan's life would be ruined, that it was an accident. My parents were broken, they took the money. We left. They buried their son far away from everyone who knew him. And your brother went off to college and built his brilliant career on my brother's bones. Now I understood. Everything fell into place. The fights between Dad and Ethan. His guilt. His attempts to buy Ethan a successful life to soothe his own conscience. And the blackmail. Ethan must have held this over Dad's head his entire life. Forgive me. He wasn't asking for my forgiveness. He was asking his own conscience. For protecting one child by sacrificing the other. This was the last, darkest secret of Ethan's reputation. Not just a cheater, not just a fraud. But a man who had ruined his best friend's life and let his father cover it up. Had a name. Emily. Had a story. And I had that letter from Dad. I didn't go to the police. The statute of limitations had likely expired, and proving anything would have been impossible. I chose public execution once again. I contacted the same journalist from the Times who wrote the first story. I told her everything. I gave her Emily's contact information. I showed her Dad's letter. The article that came out a week later was even more devastating than the first. The dark past of Ethan Carter. A story of betrayal, money, and death. It spread to every news agency. It was the end. Complete and final. There was nothing left of the man he had been. No family, no career, no reputation. Just the truth, ugly and irrefutable. Few days later he called me. For the first time through all of this. You! He hissed into the phone. His voice was unrecognizable, raw with rage and despair. It was all you. You poisonous little snake. I just told the truth, Ethan. My voice was calm. Your truth. I'll destroy you, he screamed. You already tried, I replied. And look where we both are. You have nothing left, Ethan. No leverage, no money, no power. You are a nobody. Hung up. Our last meeting happened a month later. I arranged it myself. I went to a motel on the outskirts of the city where he was now living. His Mercedes had been repossessed long ago. He came out to meet me. The man standing before me was not the polished Wall Street predator. He was a broken, aged man in crumpled clothes. His eyes were empty, but when he looked at me, hatred flared in them. Why did you come? He asked hoarsely. To admire your handiwork. I came to say goodbye, I said. We stood facing each other on the cracked asphalt of the parking lot. "You took everything from me," he said. "No," I countered. "You lost it all yourself. The day you left your friend to die. The day you started robbing old people. The day you forged a will and threw your own sister out on the street. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see who you really are." He took a step toward me, his fists clenched. For a moment I was scared. But then I looked him straight in the eye, and the fear vanished. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. "You never loved anyone but yourself," I continued. "Not even Dad. You used him, used his guilt. You thought you were smarter than everyone. But you're just a pathetic, weak man hiding behind money and lies." He dropped his hands. All the anger seemed to drain out of him, leaving just an empty shell. "So now what?" he whispered. "Are you happy?" I looked at him one last time. At the ruins of the man who had been my brother. I felt no pity, no joy. Just a cold, ringing emptiness in the place where the pain used to be. "I'm free," I said. "And you're not. You will forever be in your prison. The prison of what you've done." I turned and walked away without looking back. I walked toward my car, toward my new life. I had no home, no money. But I had something I'd never had before. Strength. A strength born from the ashes of my past. I left New York. I sold my car, bought a one-way ticket, and flew to the West Coast. I started from scratch. Rented a small studio by the ocean, found a new job. Sometimes at night, when the sound of the waves reminded me of something distant, I thought of him. I didn't know what had become of him, and I didn't want to know. He was a ghost from another life. I had won, but there were no victors in this war. Only survivors. And I had survived. I had walked through the fire of betrayal and emerged on the other side, different, hardened, whole, free. My house had burned to the ground, but on its ashes I would build something new. Something of my own. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left, and thank you for watching.